This week's episode is brought to you by Poncho, Skylar, Raven Koch, Sterling Hambrick, and Brad Jewell. Thank you, Poncho, Skylar, Raven Koch, Sterling Hambrick, and Brad Jewell. It's with the generous support of listeners just like you that keeps the experimental ghost spectrum detection optics in our low Earth orbit satellites running at exaggeratingly high full speed and feeding the unfiltered data directly into your digital device. If you'd like to help us launch more satellites to spy on ghosts, or just hear the second half of our entire catalog of episodes, please visit www.patreon.com/thewholerabbit. Where your monthly donation of just $5 will get you not just that, I'll send you a 5x5 high-quality vinyl sticker of our cover art and a message containing the secret keys to our Discord server where you can see the satellite ghost feed in real time. In fact, thank you to all our listeners, subscribers, and friends in Discord. Sometimes, even during the holidays, things can feel lonely and isolating, and it's a blessing to have friends, collaborators, and anonymous informants just like you. On this week's show, we crowd around the fire, sip hot chocolate, and enjoy the delightful experience of savoring Stanley Kubrick's final film, Eyes Wide Shut. As with any work of Kubrick's, interpreting its content is something that unfolds over decades and between a comfy blanket of many different minds, with no single interpretation being definitive or even mutually exclusive. So we cannot claim to have the entire mystery solved, or have even fully summarized the depths that Eyes Wide Shut reaches into. But nonetheless, we hope you will hear and consider things that has never crossed your mind before, and maybe give you an excuse to enjoy this Christmas story one more time during the holiday season. We discuss the story behind the film, similarities to the source material, and what the Harford family has to do with rabbits, the underworld, and the fate of their daughter Helena. In the extended show, we discuss the religious symbolism of the artwork on set, the hidden clues built into the ritual sequence, and the secret identity of Red Cloak. Thank you, and enjoy the show.
I read a schizo thread today that showed the innards of the Great Pyramids. And you know how those rooms are like, oh, it's a tomb to bury the dead pharaoh, I guess? No. Apparently they're electromagnetism modulators and they can like modulate air pressure to absorb electromagnetic radiation or something. Anyway, it was a really cool thread.
Keeping them vampires out.
I always think it's kind of funny when people say that there are people buried in the pyramids or that they were tombs for pharaohs, because it's like, no, there were no bodies in there.
Oh, there's not?
No, they're not tombs.
They even call it like the king's chamber, and they didn't know what they were looking at.
Yeah, there's no one.
Apparently there were power beacons.
I believe that shit. I'm sorry.
The king's chambers where you do the preliminary invocation of the Goetia and then bang your wife to start a new religion.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Whole Rabbit, where we don't just ask you for the password at the door, letting you inside to wallow around our super secret ritual viewing party of Stanley Kubrick's best films, only to leave frustrated, ashamed, and more confused than ever. Nay, we brazenly unmask the cast of lurid characters and hidden occult themes slithering just beneath the surface, scintillating like the elegantly glittering underbelly of high society, and expose them to the hot, piercing light of semiotic analysis, because this week we're discussing Stanley Kubrick's final masterpiece, Eyes Wide Shut. I'm your host, Hack Rabbit. I'm joined this week by the masked Madam Marisama.
Good evening. Should we speak somewhere more private?
The Mirror of Madness, Malachor 5.
Oxedo power.
And the silver streak in the storm, Heka Astra.
Hello.
So Merry Christmas, everybody. Of all the things we could have picked to celebrate Christmas, we decided to take a deeper look at Stanley Kubrick's Eyes Wide Shut.
It's totally a Christmas movie, and so is Die Hard.
I mean, Christmas is about getting gifts and having nice things and abundance.
Indulgence, right?
It's about the death and rebirth of...
The sun.
Of your boner.
But
That too.
In an astrotheological sense, yes, but we'll get to that. But first, a little bit of story behind the story. In 1968, Stanley Kubrick was beginning to brainstorm for a film that would follow his monumental 2001 A Space Odyssey, when he happened upon Traumnovelle by Arthur Schnitzler. Originally in German, Traumnovelle means dream story and follows Dr. Fridolin, who, after attending a fancy ball with his wife, gets into an argument that sends him full of resentment into the night, leading to a decadent masquerade orgy for the elite who promptly expel him, leading to the death of at least one person who assisted in the deception, which Fridolin investigates briefly before returning home to confess what happened to his wife, who mostly forgives him.
And then in 1969, there was a German film called Traumnovelle that I've looked at some scenes and it's pretty faithful to the book's rendition, and it's really old and kind of funny now. It's almost shot for shot in some sequences, the same as Eyes Wide Shut.
While researching for this episode, I listened to the book, and I was surprised how close Stanley Kubrick's Eyes Wide Shut was to the source material.
I like how he kept Nick Nightingale's name, because Nachtigall is the German nightingale.
And while some might disagree, I think the changes that Stanley Kubrick made to the source material were judicious, and at least from his perspective, he felt he was adding something to the story. In the novel, Dr. Fridolin is a bit more steamy and resentful, and I think Kubrick captures a little better the feeling of ambiguity or uncertainty, curiosity.
It's very dreamy, this movie.
Like a lot of the scenes, I couldn't tell if they were in a dream state or not. And a lot of times the characters are recollecting something or talking about a memory or even a dream they had. And, you know, it makes it harder to determine whether or not the situation that's going on in front of you is part of the dream world or the real world. So it's very ambiguous, like you said.
I wonder if he named the movie this because it's like, what are you doing when you're dreaming? It's kind of like your eyes are wide shut. Like you're seeing while you're sleeping. And I wonder if that was his, strain of thought while making the name for the movie. But at the same time, there's a whole bunch of other interpretations on what the name...
Isn't it a phrase that means I'm basically turning the blind eye to the stuff you're doing?
Yeah, like you're watching it physically, but you're not, it's not being integrated into your psyche. Like you're not paying attention to what's going on.
I do see it as double-sided. There's nothing saying that you're blind. It could be you have your eyes shut, but you're seeing somehow.
The whole concept behind The Shining is being able to detect something that others cannot, which has to do with the way Stanley Kubrick uses film to project imagery meant to affect the subconscious all throughout the film, and it creates a bit of a bigger story. And he felt so passionately about this novel, it was one of his obsessions for a long time. With a little bit of help from journalist Jay Cox, Stanley Kubrick purchased the filming rights to the novel, but he would struggle off and on through the rest of his career to finally begin production on it. At first, Kubrick wanted to make it a bit of a comedy with a somber streak, considering both Steve Martin and Woody Allen for the lead role. Finally, in 1994, Kubrick hired Frederick Raphael to help with the screenplay. While Frederick wanted to maintain the Jewish background of the protagonist, Kubrick determined that Bill should be, quote, a Harrison Fordish goy, and supposedly adapted the name Harford to reflect this. Originally, the college punks who attacked Fridolin were anti-Semitic frat boys. In an introduction to a Penguin Classics edition of Dream Story, the same Raphael wrote that Fridolin is not declared to be a Jew, but his feelings of cowardice for failing to challenge his aggressor echo the uneasiness of Austrian Jews in the face of Gentile provocation. Despite this, the Harford family may still reserve some Jewish ancestry, which is hinted at by a large red-candled menorah prominently placed in the living room just outside the kitchen. This might lead us to question if Alice is Jewish. We just wouldn't know because it's like in the book, it's not really explained. While Kubrick was considering the likes of Alec Baldwin and Kim Basinger for the role, it was while visiting the Kubrick estate in England that Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman would be awarded the roles after swearing to not commit to any other roles until shooting Eyes Wide Shut had wrapped. And this must have been a difficult commitment because Kubrick was notorious for dragging out production, and this was even recognized in the Guinness Book of World Records as the longest continuing shoot, lasting 400 days. While shooting wrapped in June 1998, it would not be until March of the following year that Tom Cruise, Nicole Kidman, and Warner Brothers executives would see the first cut of the film. 5 days later, Stanley Kubrick was dead, along with 20 minutes of the film, which would disappear into thin air.
So there is a lot of hearsay and controversy over that idea that there's missing 20 minutes or so. I read shit on the internet, I'm gonna believe it. And if you go to the Wikipedia page and you go to the bottom and you look at the edits in the past, blatantly says removed a section because it was unproven text about, Stanley Kubrick had 20 minutes of film. So, but there's buzz about it that Kubrick did have a cut and then dies and Warner Brothers changed it and nobody gets to talk about it anymore. Like we've said in the past and in this episode, Kubrick was a freaking maniac when it came to this art form of film, and he's very deliberate on what's in the shot. I think that perhaps another one of these methods was showcased in the fact that, well, the movie was to be released on July 16th of 1999, and that's the same day that JFK was assassinated. That has a whole cover-up controversy on its own, and there's conspiracy theories forever about that was a hit on JFK. That's an eyes wide shut situation. You know, are you seeing the truth or not?
Yeah, here's an eyes wide shut kind of thing. How long have people not been aware that that was an insider job? Just this week, Twitter is like, oh my goodness, the CIA did in JFK. Like, well,
the actual documents came out, like they were published officially. So, but there were insiders saying for years that was the case. But it just now became non-conspiracy to believe that because it's true.
So for me, I'm sure there's 20 minutes missing. I don't necessarily believe all those 20 minutes belong chronologically at the end of Eyes Wide Shut. I think it's possible that Stanley Kubrick did not need an explicit final chapter of the film to give it that twist of the knife that is uniquely Kubrick. I suspect it was more about the changes he made to the original, and the extra 20 minutes of film probably would have given us a more saturated, higher resolution look. Perhaps the music would have been done a little differently. It's hard to say.
I mean, one thing I noticed is that from the playwright to the movie cut, Domino doesn't actually learn his name in the scenes in the movie. She just calls him Dr. Bill after his wife calls. And we assume it's because he showed his doctor's license because he was doing that to everybody. But in the playwright, he actually tells her his name before that. So some people are confused, how does she know his name? She was set up. There might have been some things in seconds or minutes in the middle that he cut. It doesn't have to just do with one scene that's missing or something like that.
I'd imagine it's a bunch of different angles, quick lines here and there throughout the whole film. Maybe one big scene, few minutes. That might have blown our minds. That's why they got him. It's what we're saying here along with it. He did something he wasn't supposed to on film. Illuminati got him. They released their film edited.
If he was a victim, then it would make sense. If he was in possession of that cut, then they would take it with them, right? And then it would disappear, so to speak.
But his daughter has gone on Reddit and been like, no, my dad was very satisfied. Despite what everybody's, no, I heard it from this person. The daughter was like, no, my father was very satisfied with the cut. He just so happened to die. So that's why it got taken down off the Wikipedia, I'm sure, because that's the spokesperson for his estate and family.
And there's controversy about the film to this day. One presentation I saw claimed that because they made the cult of elites satanic, along with making the protagonist white and adding a Jewishly coded antagonist, it was stoking paranoia and racist conspiracy theories. Others have rejected the idea there's any deeper meaning or symbolic subtext to any of Kubrick's films, and that he was simply an aesthetic non-literalist. I personally don't buy it.
I think Kubrick was very careful to not point a finger at any single religious sect.
Agreed.
Yeah.
It could pretty much apply to any of the people in power, any of their religious dialects or any of that thing that they use.
Exactly, yeah.
And that's why they want you to not like the movie. So while dissecting a film for every single fiber of symbolism, no matter how small or tenuously connected, is perhaps over the top for some films, in the case of Stanley Kubrick, it just seems to be a path to getting the entire story as intended.
It's pretty much due diligence with Kubrick films. So Stanley Kubrick commented specifically regarding this once, saying, "One of the things that I always find extremely difficult when a picture is finished is when a writer or a film reviewer asks, 'Now what is it that you were trying to say in that picture?' And without being thought too presumptuous for using this analogy, I like to remember what T.S. Eliot said to someone who had asked him, I believe it was about the wasteland, what he meant by the poem. He replied, 'I meant what it said. If I could have said it any differently, I would have.'"
Regarding visual language and its effects on the subconscious, Stanley Kubrick was a lover of TV commercials. In an interview, he once said, "TV commercials have figured that out. Leave content out of it, and some of the most spectacular examples of film art are in the best TV commercials." The interviewer asks, "Give me an example." He says, "The Michelob commercials. I'm a pro football fan, and I have videotapes of the games sent over to me, commercials and all. Last year, Michelob did a series, just impressions of people having a good time. And the editing, the photography was some of the most brilliant work I've ever seen. Forget what they're doing, selling beer. It's the visual poetry, incredible 8-frame cuts. And you realize that in 30 seconds, they've created an impression of something that's rather complex. If you could ever tell a story, something with content, using that kind of visual poetry, you could handle vastly more complex and subtle material. So Stanley Kubrick is squeezing all of the juice out of this medium. And that's what he's known for. So it is valuable to look into the way he's arranged scenes, the strange objects that appear in frame, the colors that are used, etc.
So I've referred to this a lot in past episodes and this episode, and it's a French term for a filming technique called Mise-En-Scene, and it's the arrangement of scenery and stage properties in a play.
It's essentially the combination of location and set deck or set decoration.
It's almost like temple arrangement, which is like super important, but you're putting it into the film talisman format. So pay attention.
In the same way, you use a combination of associated symbols and colors to make a talisman, we could say Kubrick was doing the same thing with film. Due to his fear of flying, Kubrick demanded the entire film be shot in England, which was costly, and it saw crew members taking flights to New York to measure the length of sidewalks and find proper placement for newspaper dispensers, etc. According to Steven Pizzella, Kubrick's perfectionism led him to oversee every visual element that would appear in a given frame, from props and furniture to the color of walls and other objects. Stanley Kubrick even demanded the set use real, authentic building materials instead of paper or plastic, which became exceedingly expensive.
It's decadence, man. It's just like a movie about rich people. It's got to be fucking rich. That's why it's like embedded with all this symbolism. Like you could feel that richness.
I think that's what makes it a cozy Christmas film.
And, you know, something as simple as lighting, like that's one of the techniques. Light, you know, design is like painting with light into a camera lens. And it can get really complicated, but it's very mathematical. It's essentially magic. It's like cartography, but you're charting light and wavelengths. Is it an LED? Is it incandescent? Like directors know what effect those light types have on the camera lens. So every freaking Christmas light in this movie is like a fucking alarm going off to me almost.
The lighting was also done non-traditionally, where they didn't use studio or like cinema set lighting, essentially. It was all lighting that was currently built into the room. They used a few paper lanterns if there wasn't enough light, but more or less it had to do with the fixtures that were there, the Christmas lights, and the things that were actually on set. So altogether, this means, especially in the case of Kubrick's Eyes Wide Shut, absolutely nothing in frame was ever by accident. Every scrap of clutter, seemingly insignificant scribble of graffiti, to the gallery of paintings which permeate the film, it all meant something. Honestly, if cinema contains the potential to be suffused with additional meaning through its visual use of language, it would only make sense for an undisputed master to extend this craft into those dimensions. After all, it's well known that painters have long used items as banal as fruit to symbolize religious narratives, or authors naming characters to allude to another piece of literature meant to be considered alongside the original one. With this in mind, let's take a look at the names used in Eyes Wide Shut. We begin with the Harford family. Tom Cruise plays Bill Harford, and his wife, Alice Harford, is played by Nicole Kidman. The surname of the family Harford roughly translates to Ford of the Hares. The word ford means a shallow place in a river used for crossing sides, and is the West Germanic root of the English word for fair, used to describe somebody making a crossing, sometimes used interchangeably with passenger. This makes Alice Harford likely a reference to Alice in Wonderland, whose protagonist Alice crosses into another world by following a rabbit. This is hinted at in the opening sequence when the couple is preparing to attend Ziegler's party, while Bill rushes about looking for his wallet and says, "Now listen, you know we're running a little late," to which Alice replies, "I know."
I'm late for a very important date.
Which I think, as a reference to Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland, has multiple different meanings, relating of course to the dream world, and perhaps problematic relationships. Let's put it that way. Now, presenting the protagonists of the family as rabbits is a motif which carries over from Kubrick's The Shining. Jack is a reference to a male rabbit, Wendy looks like one, and according to her, Danny is called Doc, like in the Bugs Bunny cartoons. Because a group of rabbits is sometimes called a colony, this plays into the deeper narrative about colonization and the resultant genocide of the Native Americans.
Well, then not only that, it's also, you know, Dr. Sleep, right?
Yeah, it is, isn't it?
So there you go. The bell was rung again. Though that wasn't a Kubrick movie, but
It was woven into his world in a classy way, more so than it had any business doing.
So for Bill Harford, I thought Bill's name was a joke about him being a doctor and using money to cure his problems, like Dr. Bill. And doctors also make all their money by charging a bill.
Yeah, the first line of the movie is, "Honey, have you seen my wallet?" Which seems to foreshadow like all the Christmas materialistic, aspects of the season.
While Alice is teaching her daughter Helena math, she's helping her through a word problem to determine which boy has more money. So while I agree with both of you, I think Bill might have another meaning as well, because cartoons do factor into the language of Kubrick films. I thought perhaps the name Harford, connecting the family to rabbits, the idea of Bill may reference Daffy Duck, who, opposite of Bugs, has black feathers. Is it rabbit season or is it duck season? Bill struggles in the film between keeping his public persona, Mr. Harford, father, husband, family doctor in the white coat, separate from his adventures with infidelity in the black cloak and hood. Likewise, it is Alice following Bill, the white rabbit, which initiates the following story.
So this movie has very sexual themes throughout it. And when Luke brought up the whole is it rabbit season or is it duck season thing, it made me think about the huge differences between the mating habits of the two. Have you guys ever seen videos of rabbits boxing each other?
It's kind of cute.
Well, people often think that it's two males fighting over breeding rights to a female, but that's not really what's going on. The male buck chases the female until she stops and faces him. Then the female doe instigates the boxing. This is actually a very common part of wild rabbits and hares' mating rituals. They box until one leaps into the air and then the other one does the same, and that concludes the ritual dance fight of mating.
Like a High School Musical.
And then ducks, on the other hand, are renowned rapists.
They're gross creatures. We talked about them in the past.
Yep. So male ducks still need to look the part. They sport the colorful plumage, they sing, they dance just like other birds do, but female ducks are very picky, which means most of the males don't measure up. Yale ornithology professor Richard O. Prume described duck mating as forcefully violent, socially organized gang rape, sometimes even resulting in the death of the female. He goes on to detail the evolution of the sex organs, where female ducks evolved to have winding, maze-like vaginas, and male ducks evolved to have long corkscrew penises. This is referred to as antagonistic coevolution. Prume says, the selfish male evolutionary strategy that is at odds with the evolutionary interests of its female victims and possibly with the evolutionary interests of the entire species. To spread their seed, these ducks are basically upsetting the natural order of selection.
And if anyone thinks that's too far out for film symbolism, that's what the duck means on the hood of the bad guy's car in Tarantino's Death Proof.
Boom.
Boom.
Mic drop.
So the couple go to the party, and right away, following an awkward interaction with Ziegler and his wife, Alice and Bill dance in the ballroom, lamenting to each other about how they don't know anybody else there.
What stuck for me from this scene where Bill and Alice are dancing is when Alice asks, "Do you know anyone here?" And Bill says, "Not a soul." And to me, that's a strange response since he technically does know Alice and Ziegler, who are there. But instead he replies, "Not a soul," which kind of implies that he doesn't really know Alice either, or himself for that matter.
Or Ziegler, who he works for.
I think this ballroom scene here at Ziegler's party is like the first of many initiatory opportunities for Bill to show his colors.
It's around this time when Bill sees his old friend from school, Nick Nightingale, who's playing piano for the party. While Bill's excited to interact with his old guy friend from school, Alice could not be less interested. Hastily, she makes an excuse about needing to visit the bathroom and quickly proceeds to make herself tipsy in another room where she will have her chance encounter with Sandor Zavost, who nearly seduces her into visiting Ziegler's gallery of Renaissance statues for a quickie. Even though Sandor falls short of getting Alice's panties off, he does an incredible job getting inside her head. Without losing a beat, Sandor attempts to parry Alice's claims to marital fidelity by questioning the institution itself.
Interesting point. Anton LaVey's middle name is Sanzor. I can kind of see why people hearken it to Satanism, but there's a lot more to it than that.
Yeah, he's a little she's trying to leave and he like grabs her and she's like, no. And he's like, no, you know what I'm talking about though, don't you? It's like, whoa, dude, she's fucking married.
Very encouraging. Let me put it that way.
I thought Sandor was the lab where LSD-25 was first synthesized. I might be wrong.
25, December, Christmas. Fuck it, it's a hit in my book. He has an interesting dialogue with Alice when she's like, oh, I'm married. And he's like, well, you know why women used to get married, don't you?
Why don't you tell me?
It was the only way they could lose their virginity and be free to do what they wanted with other men, the ones they really wanted.
His accent's a bit thick. I wasn't watching it with subtitles the first few times. I could have sworn Sandor was asking Alice why men get married. After all, Alice only broke off from Bill after he became excited to see Nick Nightingale.
Gay.
We're going to talk about Nick a lot more later. Sandor is just here shining bright with his allure. Like, come, let's go, watch some statues.
And he's much older, too. And more affluent than, say, Bill.
Oh, absolutely. Alice is like totally with them. Like, he's got her. She's just married. There's another line that he says, quote, don't you think one of the charms of marriage is that it makes deception a necessity for both parties? Well, that's kind of like, all is fair in love and war. And in this ballroom, there is a bunch of 8-pointed stars all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
And the 8-pointed star is the Star of Inanna. And she was a Mesopotamian goddess of love, war, and fertility. And she's also associated with beauty, sex, divine justice, and political power. So that's a lot of the themes in the movie right there. Fertility, sex, justice, political power. Some of these people that were at the, big party later in the movie, they're supposedly, politicians perhaps.
Very important people. In addition, the entire party, aside from the Christmas trees that are in the background and maybe some of the bar settings, the 8-pointed stars have multicolored lights on them. Everything else is white light in a golden yellow room, right? So everything else is a yellow background. And these 8-pointed stars stand out in the background, having multicolored lights on them.
It's on purpose. And there's not a whole hell of a lot of things that symbol depicts. And this is one reason I resent the idea that Kubrick chose to depict the cult as satanic. No, he didn't. Inanna's not Satan. Inanna is Inanna.
Inanna is kind of like Lucifer, Venus, Morningstar, in terms of the physical, entity, but not symbolically.
And we'll get to that too, because there's a Venus representation later. It's not just satanic symbolism here that's going on.
And it's so clear. It's like disrespect to be like an analyst and just say it's all Satanism. It's like, no, you should know what that star is. That, he doesn't have pentagrams. He's using fucking 8-pointed stars.
Yeah.
What is that?
Satanic literature is a really thin fan fiction. Inanna, Ishtar, this is a much better franchise, you could say, with much more interesting depth. Inanna was revered by the Sumerians as early as 4000 BC. She had temples all throughout Mesopotamia. She was associated with sexual rites and, as we mentioned earlier, the planet Venus. She was known lovingly as the Queen of Heaven. The Sumerian hymn, Inanna and Utu, contains etiological myth describing how Inanna became the goddess of sex. At the beginning of the hymn, Inanna knows nothing of sex, so she begs her brother Utu to take her to Kur, which is the Sumerian underworld, so that she may taste the fruit of a tree that grows there, which will reveal to her the secrets of sex. Utu complies, and in Kur, Inanna tastes the fruit and becomes knowledgeable.
Her brother took her to a whorehouse.
I wonder which book borrowed this as source material. Oh yeah, the Bible!
Bible. So with that said, it kind of makes Sandor like the serpent in the tree tempting Eve to bite, the apple.
The forbidden fruit of the bronze gallery upstairs.
Shaped like a phallus.
Inanna's most famous myth is the story of her descent into and return from the ancient Mesopotamian underworld, ruled by her older sister, Ereshkigal. After she reaches Ereshkigal's throne room, the 7 judges of the underworld deem her guilty and strike her dead. 3 days later, Ninshubur pleads with all the gods to bring Inanna back. All of them refuse her, except Enki, who sends 2 sexless beings to rescue Inanna. They escort Inanna out of the underworld, but the Gala, the guardians of the underworld, drag her husband, Dumuzid, down into the underworld as her replacement. Dumuzid is eventually permitted to return to heaven for half the year, while his sister, Geshtinana, remains in the underworld for the other half, resulting in the cycle of seasons.
This reminds me of Persephone and Hades.
Probably in the same game of telephone. And so mythologically, just looking at the symbols in the background, it establishes this story of a goddess who undresses herself as she descends into the underworld. Her consort gets into trouble because of it, etc., etc. It's a part of the film's story, and it makes perfect sense. Okay, so back to the ball. Bill is being seduced by 2 twins who, only after being asked where they are taking him, they reply, "Where the rainbow ends."
They're not really twins. They're just two similar looking models. And one is wearing a pink dress, which looks red in the low light. And one is wearing a rhinestone dress of white diamonds or crystals that looks green. It's like has a green hue. And so there's these twins. They don't necessarily have strong coloring to their clothing, but they flank him on either side as he walks through the halls of this party. And there's also a Christmas tree with multicolored lights behind them as they walk.
So when they say where the rainbow ends, what might they be referring to?
A mythical pot of gold that's not obtainable.
Like I said, I think a lot of the scenes of the movie are initiations for Bill to get closer and closer to this group that he has no idea what he's getting into about, you know?
Like to pierce the veil?
Yeah, to see Oz behind the curtain, so to speak. So the symbol of the rainbow perhaps was also used with another nod to Wizard of Oz, as in the theme song to that movie being Somewhere Over the Rainbow.
Thematically, Wizard of Oz has a relationship to Eyes Wide Shut because Dorothy has a similar relationship to the characters she meets that Bill does in Eyes Wide Shut. There's a before and an after where he can see who this person is for real or the mask that they're wearing. Because, of course, in Wizard of Oz, all the people she meets are like the dream version of the people she thinks she knows in real life.
And in the song, it's even in a context that the rainbow is a bridge between the real world and the imaginary world. So dream story.
So in the context of piercing the veil, you could relate it back to the name Harford that implies the thin part of a river that can be crossed.
Yes, which brings it back to Paraketh, which exists as a veil in the Tree of Life. This veil specifically occurs right where Venus is stationed in the 7th sphere, which is also referenced by the Star of Inanna. The Veil of Paraketh works a lot like the Wizard's Veil in Wizard of Oz, because it's understood that the Sphere of Tifereth, the Sphere of the Sun, is the source of all the stuff below it. But when you go below the Veil of Paraketh, you don't see the unity of Tifereth. Everything is broken up into little parts. There's a little bit here, a little bit there, and the Sphere of Venus, the Sphere of Inanna, whose number is 7, takes the light of Tifereth and splits it like a spectrum into its 7 colors. So going where the rainbow ends is a pretty direct esoteric reference to moving beyond the dream realm, moving beyond the mask that reality has, and seeing it for what it really is, the source, the spirit of everything. The wizard behind the curtain, so to speak, who's orchestrating everything. Now, it could be argued the shallow place in the crossing would be Nick Nightingale. Nick has an interesting name. On the one hand, Nick is short for Nicholas, after whom Santa is commonly said to be named, Saint Nicholas. On the other hand, Old Nick is a reference to Satan. Both possibilities make sense. Nick is also a nickname that Tom Cruise used for his wife at the time, Nicole Kidman. During the argument in the following sequence, it seems most obvious that Alice and Bill were touching upon a dangerous threshold with both Sandor and the sexy pair of 2 girls respectively. But what about Nick? Is he overlooked? Nick is wearing white, much like how Bill wears white at his job. They both know each other from med school, and Bill is genuinely excited to see him. They even exchange info to meet up later, before Nick is hurried away by Ziegler's assistant. Perhaps Nick, as a rabbit, is not permitted to freely cavort with the ducks of high society. He's merely the help, and not permitted to interact with his surroundings freely. This seems like a reasonable assumption, considering that later, when we discover Nick is playing at the masquerade, he's blindfolded and not permitted the same level of freedom as the other guests in black. His surname, Nightingale, further reinforces this idea due to an old fairy tale concerning a Chinese emperor who preferred the music of his mechanical nightingale to the song of a real one.
So nightingales are named after their frequent nighttime singing habits, which causes people to wake up at night and sometimes have difficulty getting back to sleep. Their name means night songstress. It's also kind of funny they blindfold him because with both birds and rabbits alike, to keep them from being stressed out, you usually like to keep them in the dark. So if you take like a rabbit to a vet, you want to put a blanket over top of the kennel. Same with birds.
After a workday passes following Ziegler's party, the protagonist couple, Alice and Bill, retire to their bedroom for the night. Alice reaches behind the mirror of her medicine cabinet to produce a metal tin for Band-Aids containing a secret stash of low mids they smoke on the East Coast.
It is a band-aid, though.
So the pot itself is like a band-aid, but it doesn't really work well enough to heal the festering wound that's been growing inside of both Alice and the relationship, in my opinion.
Agree.
Also, weed tolerance. Tolerance being the key word there is like, can you tolerate your spouse's craziness? Like, it's going to test you, you know? Like, it's almost out of nowhere, too, this scene. It's like, why pot?
Yeah, I mean, I get pretty expressive on pot, but I'm not nearly that negative or accusatory.
It does tend to make people paranoid, though, which is a big theme in the film.
No, it's not the pot. It's you.
Yeah, I mean, Alice is just telling her truth, right? But it's her fault she held that back in a constrained way, whereas she waited to do illicit drugs. You know, like she waited to get high to actually tell her husband the truth. And when she was speaking, if you notice, there's like a blue halo light from the night outside of her window behind her. So it feels like a confessional. But the fact that she's actually inebriated at the time suggests to me almost like a dream world. She's explaining her dreams or what she fantasized about stuff to prove to her husband that, oh, not all women think like you think. Like, you know, men and women are not as black and white as you actually perceive.
While finishing the oversized joint, Alice begins to interrogate Bill. She begins by asking about the two girls he almost left with, and secondly, about the time that was missing, well, he disappeared to help Ziegler's prostitute who overdosed. Although Bill lied and said he was helping Ziegler personally, Alice replies honestly about Sandor's advances during their dance. Bill continues to try to seduce Alice by kissing her, but his lack of jealousy and excusal of Sandor ignites a fiery response. Bill explains that it comes as no surprise Sandor wanted to fuck his wife. After all, she is beautiful. But Alice resents the idea that she's attractive based on her looks alone. And if she is, how much more alluring does that make the two girls? Bill tries to explain that he's in love and a faithful married man, but Alice excuses these appeals because they amount to refusing the models as a matter of diplomacy rather than a genuine lack of desire, which she, as a married woman, is stereotyped unfairly as being devoid of herself. This results in Alice confessing in front of a section of wall resembling a Catholic confessional. She confesses that only a summer ago, she was willing to throw away her future, her husband, and their daughter, if only an anonymous naval officer she spotted at the hotel they were staying at had shown but a speck of interest. Before Bill can respond or even process what he's just heard, the phone rings and he's conjured to, quote, show his face to family members where one of his patients has just died. This foreshadows him needing to reveal his face later in the evening following a similar chronology of events, the burning of incense, the kissing of a woman. An argument between them and an interrogation results in him needing to show his face.
And also somebody dying. There's only like 2 dead people in this whole movie, so it's kind of a foreshadowing.
Oh yeah, because Lou Nathanson dies.
That was the news he heard. That's what cut the argument up. I just want to say, like, this scene for me might be my favorite Kubrick scene because it shows like a real woman bitch that is so right in her point. Like, and it's very scary as a male. Like, you know, this is a dark feminine on freaking crack.
It's funny, when I first saw the movie, I really hated this scene and it made me really dislike Nicole Kidman's character. And then watching it over again, I was like, you know, she does have good points though.
Stuff needs to be said.
It's uncomfortable because it's real.
Right.
So real. This is one of the realest scenes in all of cinema. It's an actual husband and wife talking about this too, so it's fucking crazy.
They hadn't been married that long, and the scene with the naval officer, Kubrick wanted it to be basically pornographic, and he did not allow Tom Cruise on set to, like, play goalie for that whole thing.
To possibly whoop this guy's ass.
Well, that adds to his character, right?
It's a very eyes wide shut moment. It's like, you can't see this, Tom.
But you can imagine it all you want, and multiple times during the movie.
Because for me, this scene kicks it off. From this point, the foot is on the gas now. But I want to just ask people, you know, what do you think Kubrick is trying to have our eyes shut to when we watch this movie? I think there's many layers to this. I definitely think that whole dark feminine, and that there's this weird thing that us dudes have that we don't think that women are capable of doing this. We dudes don't want to think about it. Our spouse, our lover, going there when we know we would as dudes. So I've actively tried to absorb the lesson that Nicole is trying to drive into her husband here, and that, like, you know, the reason why men talk to women isn't always about sex, because if you think that, you're dumb, dude. But this scene really like triggers me, and well, the first time I saw it, it got me pissed off too.
So before he can muster any kind of response to his wife, he gets called to the house of Lou Nathanson, one of his patients who has died. Interestingly, this puts him in the shoes of the naval officer, because the interaction with Lou Nathanson's daughter is, well, salacious and uncomfortable.
Lou Nathanson's daughter confesses to Bill that she loves him with her dad's dead body like feet away.
Yeah.
Bill like takes a couple moments in the embrace of the kiss. Then he's just like, hey, I don't really know you at all. Like, and it's another heartless interaction on Bill's not an innocent protagonist. That's what I'm saying here to sum it up. He's very cold.
But he understands she's in a heightened sense of self. I mean, she's experiencing a lot of emotions at once, and it would be normal for somebody to act out at that point if they were under that much stress. So he was trying to handle it the best he could, but he had trouble holding back from giving in to that attention. You know what I mean?
There is evidence to prove that she is in fact in love with him, because her boyfriend is in fact arguably a doppelganger of Bill's character in the movie.
Right.
And she does say that she's felt that way for a while. I think this scene is a brilliant scene where it's a reflection of the situation that he just had explained to him. He's in a house that is quite obviously an even higher class than his own house. His profession is lower on the pole than that of the math professor, technically. And she's willing to give all of that up just to be acknowledged by him. So this puts him in a very uncomfortable, reflective state after having just been emasculated by his wife.
Yes, but he's in the reflective state of the naval officer that is the center of his wife's desire. So no wonder this woman is tempting to him. And you'll see later that he actually touches back on them.
And funny thing, Tom Cruise and the actor who plays Carl Thomas, they have the exact same birth date.
Yep.
They really are doppelgangers.
Yeah, Thomas kind of looks, I don't mean offense by this, he's not as attractive as Tom Cruise is. So I think that makes him feel even more emasculated, because he must be thinking like, well, how much more attractive than me was that naval officer? And
then Bill, when Carl arrives, he promptly leaves because he intends on going to meet up with Nick at the Sonata Cafe to catch his gig, because he said he's from Seattle and he's in town for a few weeks, and he just plays in bars and stuff. So Bill, goes into the night and he walks into the Sonata Cafe. It's like this cool hole in the wall, jazz joint, not that many people, Christmas lights everywhere, of course. And then Nick finishes his set and he's kind of doing the, handshake with the crowd. And then he's like, hey, Nightingale, hey, what's up, Bill? And, there's a part here where in the book, Nightingale is just some drunk piano player, like out of it completely. He's not so innocent in his interactions with Bill, because he's straight up telling him, like, I'm going to go play at this crazy party where there's all these hot chicks. Here's the password. You should go, old friend. But here in Kubrick's telling, Nightingale is actively like, no, Bill, like, this isn't how we usually do this. Like, you shouldn't go to this party. And Bill's just like driven by something because of his interaction with his woman.
He's craving the escape.
He was having an interaction with his wife, talking about infidelity. He goes to a friend's house who had just passed away. That friend's daughter is trying to cheat on her boyfriend, so it proves his wife right. So then he goes for a walk and he's kind of meditating on this. And now Nick's telling him, like, he's asking him, what brings you out at this hour? And Bill says something else like, oh, I'm sorry, I came late, But really, we all know the answer is sex. At this point, after the beans have dropped and Nick tells him it's a sexy party, Bill can't have no for an answer.
He won't take no for an answer. He needs to see the sexy ladies. Eventually, Dr. Bill does convince Nightingale to give him the password and sets off to figure out a way to procure a costume that he might infiltrate Somerton.
So in the book, Traumnovelle, the password is Denmark. This is because in the book, the vacation the year before, where the wife is fantasizing about infidelity, it takes place in Denmark. Fidelio is a Latin term for faithful, and that's Kubrick's way of kind of obscuring the real message there about infidelity behind the opposite word itself being the password.
So Bill flirts with and charms Nick to get what he wants in very much the same way that he does with the women that he interacts with in the film. And I think, as strange as it might seem, at first that there are some parallels between Nick Nightingale and the Navy man that Alice confesses to lusting after in the argument sequence. Nick is only at his hotel in town for a few nights, and Bill, like Alice with her Navy man, is more than a little eager to spend time with him before he leaves town. In fact, they're both willing to risk their marriage and their future to spend just one night with them. After Alice calls him at Domino's place, he says he has to go, which leads us to believe that he won't risk his marriage for a romp with the prostitute. But then he doesn't go home. Instead, he chooses to risk his marriage for a visit with Nick.
So for me, there's definitely a sense at this moment when him meeting Nick and there's passwords and stuff, it's putting a spotlight on closeted sexual behavior, especially of the rich and the elite as a general theme for the movie. But within the movie, there's like, mom at home has these fantasies, shop owners, and who the fuck else? Everybody's horny in this goddamn movie. Every fucking transition scene, it's like Bill looking around the city. It's just porno everywhere. People making out and touching, filling up each other in the alleyways. Is Bill actively aware that he might be a cuck? Like, is he like in the initiatory process of getting interested in watching others bone? There's a point where I think you're so rich and spoiled in sexual desire that the only way you're satisfied is through some grand ritual, so to speak.
What's a cuck?
It's a man who enjoys watching his woman plowed by other man.
Huh.
Yeah.
It's a porn category. Holding.
Yeah. It's like,
like
the guy that films in the closet or sits in the corner and watches.
Are you saying that it's possible he's either a closet cuck or a closet homosexual?
It could be either one.
sexual activity in general. He's out for sex, but some secret, weird way of going into it because something has changed in his mind. It's not just a normal sex life anymore. He's looking for something more.
Yeah, and he mentions to Alice that she's desirable because other men would like to have sex with her. So he's having these fantasies.
So maybe he's a closet cuck because he wants to watch the other dudes.
He's trying to have fun. He's bored. He's got everything, but he's bored.
Yeah.
When Bill is found out at the masquerade, Nick is the one playing foreboding piano notes for the interrogation. These are the same notes that play the rest of the film, as if the memory of Nick and his unknown fate still haunts Bill with a sense of longing and guilt the same way the Navy man's memory haunts Alice. This homosexual tension between Nick and Bill is at least hinted at in a humorous way by the presence of the gay-coded desk clerk at the hotel where Nick has been staying the last 2 weeks, who proceeds to flirt with Bill on the presumption that he has come to see Nick for romantic reasons. Bill does nothing to dissuade either this assumption or the flirting. Does he know something about Nick that Bill does not? Does he know something about Bill that Bill doesn't even know about himself? This leads me to wonder if Bill went seeking a male prostitute, Nick, after refusing his female one, Domino. If this seems like a stretch to anyone, Kubrick may have even had some of this in mind when he cast Tom Cruise for the character. In 1987, after meeting at a dinner party in upstate New York, Tom Cruise was wed to Mimi Rogers, but sadly, the marriage would only last 2 years. In an interview with Playboy, Rogers recounted that Cruise was considering becoming a monk and would go for long periods of celibacy. Interestingly, the costumes in Traumnovelle are not so vaudevillian. They're actually of monks and nuns. When people found out that Tom was uninterested in his wife sexually, rumors began to spread. During his marriage to Nicole Kidman, a gay porn actor named Chad Slater told a French magazine that he had an affair with Tom Cruise, which Tom responded to by launching a $100 million defamation lawsuit against him. Some have speculated his pursuit of Scientology had to do with seeking a method to change his sexual preference to match his public persona. Some speculate that this led to his divorce with Nicole Kidman.
I was totally unaware of this.
Well, have you seen Top Gun? That volleyball scene? Fucking hot.
Well, Tom Cruise is a naval officer in Top Gun.
I could understand the frustration. It's very bisexual vibes, just saying.
Now, as we mentioned, Bill seeks out Nick Nightingale only after he runs into Domino, who is just a prostitute on the street that conjures him into her home to try and get $150 out of him for some sex. The name Domino, like the character's zebra-esque wardrobe, is a mixture of black and white. She, like Bill, when they meet, has one foot uncomfortably in both worlds. Is Bill paying Domino for sex, or is Domino seducing Bill? Does Domino always charge a flat rate of $150 for whatever the client wants for as long as they want? Or is it just Bill? As many have noticed, Domino's domicile is adjoining a store which prominently displays the lottery.
Dominoes are also sometimes called bones. Same with dice, since that's what they used to be made out of.
Casting bones.
Likewise, Bill is playing a deadly game of chance with Domino.
Yeah, definitely. Immediately, she gets in front of her pad. She's like, come inside. We're going to find out later that would have been a fatal mistake for our protagonist here.
He is rolling the dice because we find out that she has HIV.
Later on, but at first, he's interrupted and he actually walks out on Domino.
To go to see Nick. Somehow,
Yeah.
his wife calls him. He doesn't bone. He's just like, you know what? I got to leave. I got to go see my boy Nick play. That's what I was trying to do.
But he pays the whole price.
Prominently placed behind Domino on the bed is a stuffed tiger, which might be a reference to Tony from The Shining, because after all, Alice calls because she has some sort of wifey intuition.
Her wifey spidey senses were tingling. Alice was watching a movie about an unfaithful husband when she decides to call Bill. The movie is actually called Bloom in Love. And funnily enough, the scene that we see from that movie, it shows a man saying thank you and a waiter replying prego prego, which means you're welcome in Italian. So I think just like at Ziegler's party with the two models, and just like his being called to Lou Nathanson's house, Bill is once again saved by the bell and seemingly not all too upset about it. I think he's actually thankful for it.
The name Domino is actually the name of a style of a mask found particularly in Venetian carnivals. The name is actually believed to derive from the Latin word dominus for the word lord. They can be simple black ones that you see like Zorro wear, all the way up to like those fancy porcelain and gold feathered elaborate ones with a handle on them. And it's also the kind that the protagonist is wearing in Traumnovelle, the movie.
In the novella, the guardians at the threshold of the masquerade are called dominoes. The event also occurs during Carnival in Vienna rather than New York at Christmas time.
Both of those times being times of indulgence.
So Eyes Wide Shut has a bunch of fertility symbolism mixed into just about every single scene. And just as an example, both rabbits and nightingales are symbols of springtime fertility. In the classic Homer's Odyssey, he describes a nightingale singing in the woods when springtime has begun. Another fertility symbol that we see throughout the film is the Christmas tree. The conifers that we use as Christmas trees are evergreen, ever fertile, so to speak. And these trees occur in nearly every scene of the movie except for the masquerade. The traditional putting up of the Christmas tree is very much like the Egyptian raising of the Jed pillar or the rising of a phallus. For more information about how that is all related, I suggest revisiting the Black Cross of Saturn episode that we did. Anyhow, Christmas trees are ancient phallic ritual symbols that have been stolen and integrated into the modern cultural practice that we call Christmas. The round ornaments are testicular in nature, and the glimmering tinsel is reminiscent of streams of semen. When Bill steps into Domino's place, the first thing that he comments is "nice tree," referring to her Christmas tree, to which she kind of rolls her eyes and dismissively says thanks. So he's at the prostitute's home and is still seemingly more drawn to the phallic symbol, and I think this is largely due to feeling emasculated after Alice's confession. He's chasing fertility.
This is what makes me wonder if Bill's role in the cult, if he is being initiated, is to breed. This brings us to Helena.
Their daughter.
Helena means light or bright, and understandably is exactly that for the Harford family. Most likely, Helena is a reference to Helen of Troy, whose kidnapping initiated what Greek mythology deems the first war among men, or the Trojan War. Helen was the child of the non-consensual forcing of sex upon a water nymph named Leda by Zeus, in the form of a swan, Helena was said to be the most beautiful woman in the world. The war kicked off when Venus, making good on her promise, enchanted Helen to fall in love with Paris, who had favored her in settling a bet between Athena, Hera, and herself concerning who was the appropriate recipient of a golden apple bearing the phrase Callisti, which means for the fairest, sent to Mount Olympus by Eris, goddess of chaos, who had been snubbed and not invited to the party. Paris choosing Venus was quite the controversy. Athena, after all, had offered him victory in battles, and Hera had offered to make him the king of all men, making his decision an apt comparison to both Bill and Alice, who were willing to throw away their entire future for a taste of sensual pleasure. Ominously, in terms of Eyes Wide Shut, this might suggest Helena's eventual kidnapping as a result of Venus working her enchantments, a solid mimetic match for the opening sequence during Ziegler's ball, which prominently displays stars of Ishtar, and prompts enmity and argument between Bill and Alice, which ultimately draws Helena into greater and greater danger. This gives some credence to the idea that she disappears suspiciously in the final scene, perhaps having been taken by the cult as some form of collateral.
Bum, bum, bum.
But if you'd like to hear the rest of the story and hear about the things we can't say in the free show, please visit www.patreon.com/thewholerabbit, where your monthly donation of just $5 will get you access to our entire library of extended episodes, more than doubling the content of The Whole Rabbit. I'll send you a 5x5 vinyl sticker of our cover art and the secret keys to our Discord server, where you can talk to us about Stanley Kubrick, Symbolism, until the cows come home. And I don't know why you're sitting at home waiting for cows. Maybe you need some milk.
If you join our Discord server, make sure to say Fidelio.
Thank you, everybody. Eat carrots and shoot lasers.